Oh. And we're live on a mighty blaze. It's Pub Day Tuesday, and here we are again. It's Tuesday, July 11th. I'm Robin Kall, your host. On behalf of Reading with Robin, my guest is Adrienne Brodeur. Look at this wild game out in paperback today with Malabar peaking. This is so clever, Adrienne.
I know. I wish I could take any credit for it, but I can't. Hi, Robin. It's so good to see you again.
So honest. It's so good to see you too. I will read Adrienne's bio. Adrienne Brodeur began her career in publishing as the co-founder with filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola of the National Magazine award-winning Zoetrope All Stories. She has worked as a book editor, is currently the executive director of Aspen Words, a program of the Aspen Institute. She lives in Cambridge, Mass. with her husband and children, and visit her site at adriennebrodeur.com. Follow her everywhere. You are fabulous at the social media. And
thank you.
Adrienne, truly welcome to A Mighty Blaze on Pub Day.
Yay. And can I just say, thank you to A Mighty Blaze for all they're doing, lifting up all these authors and books and readers. It's amazing.
It's heavy, Adrienne. It's exhausting and heavy to be lifting up all of these, but although yours is light and fluffy.
I know, because it is a summer beachy book.
Summer beachy book, and look at the gorgeous new cover. Do you have the hardcover there too?
I can. Can I just step off screen for 1 second?
Yeah, we'll just juxtapose. I told Adrienne I'd ever call on my authors to do anything they weren't told in advance, and then I lied because oh, it's beautiful. They're both gorgeous, but they really.
Thank you.
I mean, and it's really interesting. This is a memoir, so really interesting to talk about.
Sorry, I can't balance it.
Oh, we were just talking about you. To talk about a memoir as an escape, but this book, if you guys have not read Wild, if you read it in hardcover, it's time to read it again in paperback. Because when I read this book last year, even maybe before that, because Taryn had sent it, and Taryn, the amazing publicist of the world, sent it to me and said, you are going to love this book. And she was right, of course. And then we had you join us at our author series last October.
Yep.
Where I had you come early because we picked it as a Reading with Robin book club pick. You're such a team player, Adrienne. You really have gone all out, and people just love connecting with you. I met one of your friends, right?
I know. That was so fun to see her. She's a childhood friend and talked about that cereal aisle showdown with my mother when she was 7 years old or something.
Yes. Can you talk about that? That was, talk about that. That was great.
Well, so yeah. I'm not going to say her name in case she doesn't want, but she showed up at your event in Providence, and I hadn't seen her in a long, long, long time. And there she was, and I was talking about my mother and the background of the book. And all of a sudden I hear this voice, and my mother's name is Malabar, for those of you who don't know. And this voice was like, yes, Malabar scared the hell out of me as a child. And she just told this wild story, which was, we grew up in New York City together. And when, she left in about third grade, we just sort of parted ways young. And somehow we stayed in touch enough that she was put on a bus, as they used to do back in the 70s, and just sort of sent to Cape Cod, where my mother picked her up. And for some reason, I wasn't around yet. And she went to the A&P with my mother, and my mother was like, what kind of cereal would you like? And of course, she wanted some fruity, kooky kid cereal. And my mother was like, that is not the kind of cereal we eat. And she just said they had this, major showdown in the store.
I love that. That was, we couldn't have planted that. If I had been able to say, who from Adrienne's life should we have at the Cardigan Connection who can tell this story that, have you come up against that other stories at other readings? When the book
different.
Yeah.
It's been one of the really surprising, beautiful, and unexpected things about book tour, and even these virtual book tours, is someone will ask a question and they're from some part of your life that you don't know, your mother's best friend's daughter, or someone shows up, and it's so special. It's so special because you get more information about who the people are. I don't know. It's lovely.
Yeah, and I was wondering, so had your friend told you that story? Did you know the cereal story?
I had never heard that story before.
Which is which is one of the most amazing things about childhood memories and how vivid they are. And she must not have thought of telling you, or they left the supermarket, however they did, but that it stayed with her. I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being alone with one of my friend's mothers at that age.
Especially like an indomitable mother who is, I mean, my mother was a force of nature and she's wonderful too, but she would, I mean, she intimidated me. So I can only imagine that she would have intimidated my little friends.
Your little friends who got on a bus, like you say, back in the day. And yeah, there's nothing like the 70s. That's the answer to a lot of questions about why.
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
Question, it was the 70s. But yeah, I'm just thinking of some of my friends' mothers. I don't even know. I would, yeah, they were like scary, some of them. I
Well,
mean,
some of them were and some of them weren't. But you know, you knew which ones were which for sure.
yeah, I'm thinking of them right now. Having a flashback. So yeah, so why is this pub date different from all other pub dates? We asked
Well,
the Passover table.
yeah. I mean, of course, the world is so different right now. And I think, you know, I think that's the big thing, of course, but it's actually, you and I were talking briefly before. I mean, it's simultaneously different, but more expansive in a weird way. So on my, you know, tour in the fall and through the winter, I mean, I was getting on a plane and going and getting on a bus and going and just going and going and going. And this entire next few weeks, I will be doing from right here. And I will be meeting new people. And the idea that I can zoom into all of these book clubs that I've been doing and actually really enjoying it, because there's no way I could stop at 75 book clubs along the way. And I've
Right.
just been able to connect with readers in a really beautiful way and hear their stories. And it's, you know, it's so weird because it's so not intimate and intimate at the same time.
You know, it's interesting. I'm hearing that it's even more intimate. I suppose if you're in the front row at an event and you have a great seat, or the front or
Yeah.
second row, that's why every event I've been doing, I'm like, you get a front row seat. And people are, and you know, I don't ask necessarily for the feedback, but I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing from a lot of people that they feel like these are more intimate and they can ask questions. And we're on a mighty blaze, and people are you know, we're on Facebook. Adrienne and I are in Zoom right now, but you guys are on Facebook and you can be leaving questions, and Adrienne, you can go back and answer them later.
Oh, great.
Also, the Crowdcast events, shameless plug for our event tomorrow night. Adrienne, Gail Caldwell, I just happen to have my prop, and Lindsay Crawford. I mean, look at this. This is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And you
And I
can,
love that you called it a memoir palooza.
yeah, right? If you put Palooza next to something, or Obama, it's just immediately more fun, right? And these books just go so well together, and they're all out today. Today's
Yeah.
pub day for, I mean, so had that happen. So people can message me on Reading with Robin if you want more information about that. But it's the kind of thing where people, especially with nonfiction, I mean, very more specific questions. I mean, we certainly don't want to ruin the narrative or do spoilers. It's a little trickier with a memoir sometimes, because some of it, you know, we know, but
Right.
people, but you don't really know the whole story till you read it in its entirety. And Wild Game was absolutely one of my top books last year, and in soft cover, you know, paperback, it's still is, because you know, it's, you didn't change the story. So what have you thought about in this past year, you know, after it came out, after you heard from people and it was everywhere on every list, people pick the top of every list? I mean, this was just like, if you didn't read Wild Game, what are you waiting for? So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Some of the things you've gotten back from your readers.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing that I've learned is it's less about, you know, writing memoir is less about the actual events of your life than it is about the consciousness you have about them, and the story you tell and how you share that information. The most enlightening thing for me going on book tour and speaking to readers, I mean, first of all, you know, when everyone shares their stories and you realize that your own wackadoodle situation is not necessarily as unheard of as you thought it was, it makes you feel less alone in the world. So there's been something really beautiful about that, really just extraordinary, because obviously not everyone's gone through the same thing, but there are enough people who've had sort of situations of inherited trauma, or wanting to break a cyclical pattern in their family, or just having a boundaryless parent, or not wanting to mother as they've been mother, or any one of these things. So that has been it's just been helpful. It's been helpful for me in my life. It's been helpful to have these conversations. And I think the other fascinating thing, which I really didn't realize until the book was out in the world, is that I know exactly the book I wrote, and I know how much love I felt for every character in the book. And no, it's just the understanding that the book you read and you and you and you and everyone is an entirely different book than the one I necessarily wrote, because it's a very dynamic process, and every reader comes to a book with their own experiences, their own lens. And so I would hear people one night describe the book one way, and then I'd be introduced by someone else who would describe it in an entirely different way. And that was just interesting. And in the beginning, I kind of was like, oh no, 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 like my book was this. This is my book. And then I was just like, no, this is fascinating.
Isn't it? It's like looking at art, you know, you
Yeah.
take something different. And I remember just the incredible love, such a love story. That's the way I read it. And just so full of passion and drama and, all right, a little bit of inappropriate behavior, but like I just read it as this beautiful love story
Yeah.
on many levels.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, Adrienne and I were talking off air about how much I read, and certain books you just don't put down. And when I read Wild Game, when I sat down with that book, and I can remember where I was, and I actually remember where I had the pen because I like to make some notes in the galley, not in the hardcover, and I just read it. I don't think I put it down, and I'm pretty sure my daughter might have read it first when Taryn sent it, as she often does, and says you must read this book. It's just filled with such richness and sensual delights and food and salty air and characters, and you know, it was just such a triumphant
Thank you. Well, I'm
experience.
in Cambridge now, but since the pandemic, I've mostly been on Cape Cod, which is one of the longest periods of time I've ever spent there, sort of since April. And so I'll come back and work and just stay in this house and not go out. But it's been so great to be back on Cape Cod and to actually, just what you're saying, the brackish air, the gulls, it's low tide is upon us. I'm clamming again.
I saw you had some great, so visit AdrienneBrodeur.com, and then also from there you can visit her Facebook page, her Twitter, and her Instagram, and you had a beautiful little video going. You really do a great job, and your readers have photographed Wild Game in many places, which is really great to see. And you should follow Adrienne there and like her page and all of that. And also Amazon and Goodreads reviews are so fabulous to do with authors. So yeah, I always try and remember, because I don't, I write notes, but then I don't look at them. But I really do encourage readers, after you've read a book that you've loved, go and give it 5 stars and write your review. Take you 2 seconds, literally. And then you could be like top reviewer. Some reviewers love to do that. So tell the story a little bit. I mean, give the essence of Wild Game.
Oh, okay, sure. So
why not talk about the book?
Why not? So Wild Game tells the story of one of those pivotal moments in my life that actually happened when I was 14. So many, many years ago. And it's set on Cape Cod, right on the water. And the event that happened was, a dinner party that my mother had with family friends. I'd been down on the beach, sort of making out with a neighborhood boy I liked. I came back to my room, I went to sleep. And at some point during the night, and late at night, I heard my door open, and my mother came into the room, and she sat down on my bed, and she kept trying to wake me up. And I remember so well just being like, no, I want to think about the boy. I don't want to wake up. And she woke me up with the words, Ben Souther just kissed me. And Ben Souther was my stepfather's best friend, part of this couple who'd been visiting for the weekend. And although we didn't know it at the time, we didn't know that it was going to become this, epic and lengthy love affair. What I knew in real time, just as it happened, was that my life had changed, that I'd sort of gone to bed as Malabar's daughter, and I'd woken up as her confidant and helper and sort of co-conspirator in what would become just a very long and passionate love affair.
Wow. So you knew, like, you couldn't put yourself back at that time. You can like really remember that exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, I also happened to, I was a journal keeper as a child, but that was when my journal actually got interesting. As opposed to like, oh, why isn't Susie being nice to me today?
Susie sucks, that's why. Do you have a lock on your diary?
No, I actually never have.
Yeah, I would.
But I mean, most of our diaries are so interesting. And I think, I mean, maybe I'm foolish and maybe everyone's been reading them all the way along, but I don't think so.
That's so funny. No, and then plus the ones with the locks are honestly very easy to pick.
Have you done some lock picking in your day?
No, but apparently I think my sister did. I think it's a bobby pin. All of my diaries with the locks on them. And right, not very interesting, but this is like, so when you sat down to, and the ideas for writing this book were in your head, did you know like is that the jumping off point?
That was always the jumping off point. And I think one of the things that I knew about this book, and I think why it's often described as sort of a novelistic style memoir, is I had very particular scenes in mind. I always knew it would start with the kiss. I always knew, the certain bigger moments that would be the sort of anchors of the book. And really a lot of it was sort of figuring out how to connect, how to make those connections from, a moment at 14, a moment at 17, a moment at 23, walking down the aisle, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But not, it's not autobiography. You're not sort of walking down the hallway in between all these things and doing every single thing you did in your life.
Right. No, it's just, it's such a page turner, and the pacing is incredible, and the stories, and talk about your mom. I mean, because what an accomplished woman and cook and really performer.
Yes. Well, my mom was incredible. She is incredible. She's sick now, so she's not the same person she used to be, but she was an extraordinarily charismatic woman. She was an incredible chef. She'd studied at the Cordon Bleu and had all these cookbooks, and every sort of moment in my childhood was a test recipe. So my brother and I would come home from school and there would be some like exotic, not child-friendly dish that we would be like, can we please have a fish stick? But so when she, and to be fair to her and give sort of a little bit of backstory, she had a very complicated life, a very simultaneously glamorous and difficult life, but she was an only child. She had really narcissistic parents. She went on, she had an unhappy marriage to my own father, and then she met my stepfather and was very in love with him. And he had all these strokes, 4 strokes in 5 days, became quite incapacitated. And about 8 years into that marriage was when she fell in love with Ben Souther. And so when that happened, because the writing was sort of the food writing was her thing, and being a great chef, and her lover happened to be avid hunter and fisherman. So that's how they decided to come up with the Wild Game Cookbook, which is kind of the thing that holds the book together, all these recipes that they tested and these ways that the couples would get together, because they were couple friends too, and close couple friends, which, adds to sort of everything that's good and bad and twisted about the situation.
Well, there's that. Yeah. I might have asked you this, but did you come up with a Wild Game Cookbook as an addendum? Or did I not?
No, I mean, it's interesting. I have found when I've had to go through different things of my mother's, for just healthcare reasons, I have found lots of skeletons of old cookbooks. Like there was a waste not, want not, sort of a how to, recipes for leftovers. I've found so many. I have not actually found the notebooks that would be from the Wild Game Cookbook, although I do know it was submitted as a proposal to Pequot Press and turned down, because how much of a market is there for a Wild Game Cookbook? But I'm sure I'll find it at some point.
Yeah, everything is open now. Everything's wild because we're looking for stuff. This might be Adrienne, this might be the moment for the Wild Game Cookbook.
Okay.
You have to find it. So you think it's there somewhere, right? It must be.
I'm sure it's there somewhere. I mean, my mother is a pack rat and she didn't throw things out, but neither do I feel comfortable rifling, through her stuff.
Okay. So I'd be online to purchase this just to have as an artifact.
Squirrel fricassee.
Just maybe to put on the show. I am a vegetarian, so that's what this is, incredibly amusing to me, but I just love the idea, you know, it was just this this plot within the plot
Yeah.
of the story. And I'm chatting with Adrienne Brodeur. Wild Game is out in paperback today. If you haven't read this, oh my God, what are you waiting for? And also you can get in touch with Adrienne if your book club is reading it.
I would love to zoom in. You can
And then you've got here, this is so,
Malabar.
this is so beautiful. What a beautiful photo. And yeah, and when it arrived, I was like, wait a minute. I thought, so, oh, wait a minute. There she
Yeah.
is.
I like the fact that the eye is just peeking out over the beach
Oh,
scene.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Houghton Mifflin has wonderful designers.
Absolutely. Oh, they do. They do. They did such a beautiful job. And this was really, what does People magazine says? This electrifying, gorgeously written memoir will hold you captive until the last word. And this is true. This is true. This was absolutely one of my favorite books that I read in 2019. A different time, an easy time. It's a great book to read in quarantine, although you have to savor it. And that's the thing with a book that you love to read, that when I love to read a book, I simultaneously want to know what's happening and have something to look forward to.
I am so the same.
Right? It's really tricky. What's something that you've read lately? I see a lot of books behind you, but what
Oh, well, the book that I most recently read and just loved was The Vanishing Half. I know you spoke to Britt Bennett, right? Recently. I also loved Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. That was a lot of fun. And both of those might not be sort of, they're both heavy, they're both serious books, and yet they have that kind of gripping narrative in that same, in that way that you can't put them down. So they're really delightful. I haven't read Kevin Kwan yet, but I want to read his new book.
Sex and Vanity. I think it came out last Tuesday.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having him on at the end of this month. Yeah, it came out last Tuesday. It's so hard to remember dates. I mean, you know your Tuesdays by heart, but some books have been switched around and some books have been like really early or super late or whatever. So I think of that as July, but it was almost July. It was the June 30th. I was so confused last week when it switched to July. It really threw me.
Oh, go ahead.
No, there's sort of, I'm even more tethered to the calendar because of all of the interviewing and
right.
Schedule. Yet in the summer, it's usually a little looser. But now if I just don't check every, so often about the day, I feel like I could just, miss a couple.
Well, it's honestly so hard to tell the days apart. Like, when does Sunday end and Monday start? I mean, I think all of us are kind of like, wait, what is this?
These are the questions we're grappling with, Adrienne. We can tell because Benny goes to camp on Monday. Yeah. So that's how we know. He knows on Sunday night that I'm going to camp tomorrow. But other than that, it really is very, very difficult to keep track. Are you also, what's been something that's been a real silver lining, other than getting to meet with a lot of readers that you've either rediscovered during this time or had extra time to?
You mean sort of during the pandemic and COVID?
Yeah, the last couple of months.
Oddly, I have had I shouldn't say oddly, I've had a much more wonderful time with my family than I expected to. And I feel like I've heard that from a lot of people. I think we all thought, what are our teenage daughters going to do? They're going to die, being in, quarantine. And in fact, like, board games. We've been reading a ton. Yes, we've also watched a lot of movies and done devising and everything else, but it's been surprisingly, there's been something that's really lovely about, I miss people. I really want things to get back to normal. Do not get me wrong. But there's been something lovely about the absence of social anxiety with children and just a lot of time to be together.
Yeah, I think this is like, when you think about seminal moments that you remember, I wonder how many memoirs that people are thinking about working on. The jumping off point will be, and we thought we were just going to be in for 2 weeks. or it starts like this: we bought toilet paper for 2 weeks, and then 5 people came to stay with us.
Exactly.
You guys can have that. I know it's just brilliance that just like pops off.
I say, if that's how my book starts, you'll know.
Okay, that sounds so familiar. But there are certain moments, and one of the things that you were talking about before about memoir and people having these realizations, I think when reading a memoir, I know I do. I will remember things I haven't thought about in a while, and it's very different than reading fiction. I don't know what it is about it. I don't know if it's the time or if it's place or what it is, where I think, or a story sort of comes unbidden.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean it's time to write a story, but it's like a memory flashes, more so when I'm reading memoir, which
Yeah.
which is something to note. I don't know if that's something that you've heard from other people, or do you get people that tell you that you could write their memoir? They have a story.
I have had many offers to write other people's stories, and it's so, I mean, look, it's very flattering and it's very kind, but it's also the missing element, of course, is that you can only write your own memoir. You can only, like, I'm sure some, obviously that runs in the face of all the celebrity memoirs and everything else, but you meaning you, the world of writers, it's your voice. It's your voice telling your story. It's not just your story. I mean, if it's just the story, it's not, it sounds sort of like the Olympics, like there's the trauma Olympics and the this and that. But if it's your consciousness, as I said before, it's your voice in interpreting those events that actually makes it your memoir and not 100 other people's memoirs. So I don't think there's any room for other people to write your stories.
I'm sure I could imagine a lot of people are handing them to you. What, you think you have a story? Well, let's look at this.
Well, and the truth is, I believe that. I mean, I believe people have had much more shocking things happen to them. I even remember, so I started this book at Hedgebrook, which is an incredible residency program for women on Whidbey Island. And I remember sort of the first night sitting around the fireplace with these 7 other women, and 2 or 3 of them were working on memoir. And I had suddenly this, like, I don't know what you'd call it, survivor's shame or something, but like, my life wasn't that traumatic. Like, what gives me the right to your mom beat you, my mom just lied or coerced me into this thing, like, and then I was like, why am I letting myself go here? It's not about, as I said, the pain Olympics or something. It's about telling the truth and having authenticity about your story and learning something from your own story.
Yeah, and what your readers will take from the story. And there's so much to talk about. There's so much to take, and so thought-provoking. And it's a wild game, and it's out in paperback today. Visit adriennebrodeur.com for her complete tour and other places that you'll be doing other events. And tomorrow night, I'll do one more time. Brodeur, Gail Caldwell, and Lacey Crawford in Memoir Palooza.
You need just one more hand.
Another hand. It would be very handy, wouldn't it?
I look forward to talking to you tomorrow night.
Looking forward to it also. On behalf of A Mighty Blaze, we wish you a very happy Pub Day. Adrienne and I will see you soon. Hopefully you won't get sick of me like her.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, A Mighty Blaze. Great.
Thank you. Bye.